Amazon, Google, Starbucks, just three of the companies that we've been hearing about right out of the front pages who have been called before the UK's Parliament to talk about tax and what they're doing about it. I'm joined by Tom Bergen, who broke the story about Starbucks and has carried on with his work, and John Hemming, who's an MP with a business background who's been following the issue carefully. Tom, I want to start with you. Why now? I mean, this is an issue that's come up in the past with things like Vodafone and so on. We've seen riots and so on, but now it seems to have really captured the imagination. I mean, it ended up immediately on the front pages of papers around the world. It's not a UK story. It's a global story about tax and consumer-facing businesses.
Absolutely. The Starbucks case, they've had store occupations, etc., outside this country and protests elsewhere as well, in Europe in particular. The Starbucks obviously has got a very broad brand. The fact that it had always positioned itself as being more ethical than other companies.
So it feels hypocritical. I
think some people felt that when Starbucks was saying that it had higher standards than other people, which it literally did say, then to be engaged in these kind of activities, these intercompany royalties, etc.
Or Google, do no evil, isn't it?
That was something that came up on the parliamentary committee hearings. You know, that people mentioned that. I think people found that a little bit. Hang on a second. You're saying that you're trying to be a force for good, but usually paying your taxes is perceived to be a key element of the social equation that people have.
So, John, what can government do? Because people are looking to government now. They've read the story. They're cross. They're very angry. Yeah. What can government do to address this?
There are a lot of issues, but if you look at issues like royalties, whether there should be withholding taxes, there are a lot of issues. It's very interesting, actually, within the context of the debate about the EU. These are issues that take international action. There's no question about it. You can't necessarily, as one sovereign state, deal with it all.
I mean, because essentially the issue is, Tom, what you've found, it feels nasty. It doesn't feel right, but it's not illegal.
Generally, I mean, it's a very difficult area to say what's legal and what's illegal in the tax area, and realistically, it's only when it goes to court that you find out. So we certainly the activities we've looked at, intercompany interest payments, you know, highly leveraging companies in a way that's way beyond what you would consider reasonable for any normal company, etc. That these things are not technically illegal at the moment, at least, but they do seem to be people to be not consistent with the intentions of Parliament when Parliament set the tax rate and set the tax rules.
I mean, you've talked to some board members. What are they saying?
Well, what I've, you know, for the feedback I get from some senior executives and non-executives in this country and across Europe is that they remark upon how so many of these companies are relatively new companies, and they question whether the willingness that they have to engage in aggressive tax behaviour, it reflects the fact that they haven't experienced the long-term preservation of reputation that maybe some of the older companies. For example, for 8 years I covered the oil industry, and the biggest companies in the oil industry are all over 100 years old, and they take it very seriously how they're perceived and their license to operate. It's a company like Google won't have anything like the sort of cultural exactly. They couldn't possibly be aware how dangerous it is to be perceived as a social pariah.
So one of the things that I find as a board director is there is this sense of a dichotomy. On the one hand, we're supposed to be stewards of the investment and making sure that the money gets returned and that we're doing the best we can. But at the same time, there is this other social issue. We've got larger issues. The boardroom agenda is changing. I mean, as someone who has been in business, you know, and served on boards, what's your sense of how that works?
Well, I think that there has been often you find a board is very dominated by the professional advisors. I've not had that much experience of that because I've tended to spend my own money and therefore not need to protect my back so much. I think there is always a long-term issue. Well, accountants, very often accountants measures their success on coming in and finding a way in which the company can save some money through tax and say, well, pay us so much money for this advice and we'll save you so much tax. And so there's a sort of sales approach from that point of view. The difficulty is you need to maintain your long-term reputation. Not just in terms of the retail market for people to come and buy things from you, but also for employees and for investors as well. So there is an ethical investment area, ethical investment funds.
And that is growing.
And that is growing. And it all comes around to people's recognition that everybody is part of society, and if you treat things on an atomised basis and you don't ignore wider society, everybody suffers.
I think that the interesting thing is, and we see this now in the US with the issue around guns and so on, is if you track back the money, actually the public owns these companies. Pension funds are investing in companies, and people are caring much more about where their pension money is going. They want returns, but even in a difficult market, they want to know that actually it's reflected in the values.
Because it affects them on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
I think you come back to the point that everybody is affected by the difficulties of government finance.
And Tom, do you think that there's an increase in transparency, that board members will be getting phone calls?
Well, certainly board members will be questioned, as they were in another crisis, and we saw the financial crisis, about what their role was. You know, more is expected of board directors now than was in the past, and this is just one issue and one other issue where they will be asked to account for their decisions.
They'll be held personally accountable.
Yeah, I think so.
I agree. Thank you both very much. This was a terrific discussion.